is presenting on behalf of Carya.
Angela, right here, yeah.
Okay. We're ahead of schedule, so you have plenty of time, no need to rush.
Oh, good. That's what everybody wants to hear. Can you guys all see this here? I can't see any of you, so if you have any questions or whatnot, please just let me know. So I am presenting on our spoke functional family therapy. And so, I mean, I could talk about FFT all day. I've been with the program since 2013, first as a therapist and now a manager at Carya. And so I oversee this program along with a couple of others. So really excited to be a part of the spoke, that this program is a spoke with our hub partners. Functional family therapy is a preventative short-term program. We work with families of youth age 0 to 18 who are at risk of or currently experiencing a number of issues related to school truancy, mental health concerns, criminal involvement, substance abuse, family conflict, or interpersonal violence. We work with the whole family, so that is something that I think is a little bit different. We work with the whole family from start to finish. Family as defined by the family. So we have, you know, often extended family, siblings, basically whoever is a key player in what's happening in that family system, we would invite to participate. So we do have pretty full sessions. It typically looks like 10 to 12 sessions over a 6-month period. And our program is collaborative in nature. So many of our referrals come from diversion services, Calgary Police Youth Programs, such as the MASS team and the YARD team. We receive a number of school referrals, referrals from AHS teams, such as Adolescent and Children's Day Treatment Program. And then, of course, we are collaborative with our partners. So Families Matter here. We are also spoked to YW Calgary, and a part of our team is in partnership with Catholic Family Service. So collaborative is a big part of what we do. Our model is evidence-based and strength-based. So FFT was first developed in the States, and it now is seen as one of the top models in the United States for working with youth experiencing substance abuse and, kind of in their words, delinquency. So their youth coming out of their youth criminal justice system. It's practiced in over 10 countries. And there's all sorts of literature and research to support the evidence and the fidelity and adherence to the model across all those countries. So in theory, you could go to Australia, request FFT, and it would be delivered in the same way as it would be here in Calgary. Calgary is very unique in that we are the only Canadian site to offer FFT. And we've had it in Calgary since 2013. And we recently finished a randomized control trial study in 2019, so 2014 to 2019, in which we looked at how FFT as a model worked and compared with other treatment modalities here in Calgary. Our outcomes were outstanding, really, really great in terms of parent and family well-being. And I mean, obviously I could talk a lot more about that, but if you do have specific questions where you want to see more of the literature specifically related to our Calgary research, I can definitely share that with you outside of this presentation as well. The model itself is strength-based. So we describe it as a change model that is focused on risk and protective factors. So really the crux of the work over the course of those 12 sessions is to decrease risk factors for the individual, family, and community, and build on protective factors within that family unit. And we want the family to have a different experience of their story. I'll talk about this a little bit more as we go into the clinical model, but many referrals we get, as I'm sure each of you in your programs get, are problem focused and youth focused. And so really a lot of what we do is help the family to understand that those quote unquote problem behaviors make sense in the context of what's happening in that family system at that time. And that's some of the work that the therapist is kind of diving into right away. Our clinical model. So we are a phase-based model, phase-based model with three phases. So motivation phase, behavior change phase, and generalization phase. So the motivation phase, engagement and motivations phase, is really first contact to those first few sessions once we get in the door. And one thing that I think sets this model apart is because we know we're working with sort of more higher risk families that have had a lot of challenges and negative experiences with system navigation, and being involved in multiple systems. Sometimes motivation is quite low, which makes sense. And so we are very relentless in working to engage and motivate families to participate in this program. So it's not like we call 3 times and then if we don't get a hold of them, we take them off the wait list. Often we are trying to engage families for several weeks, really working to gain alliance with all family members, trying to talk with everybody in the family, really recognizing that we have to do the extra work up front in order to even get in the door and to establish that trust and relationship. And then when we get in the door, sort of those first few sessions are that motivation phase, and our goals are decreasing blame and negativity, building a relational focus within the family. So again, that's kind of shifting the behavior, whatever is on the referral, from being a youth focused problem to sort of a more relational family issue or concern. Because we're a full family model, we're also working on balanced alliance with every single member of the family. And our hope is to increase the hope of family members so that they feel like things can be different, things can improve. And so again, really what we're trying to work on and help make sense of is that the behavior, whatever is happening in the family, it makes sense in the context of the family. So quick example would be a common referral that we get from, say, a school would be truancy or school issues or not attending classes, what have you. And so, then when we're working with the family, we've got the whole family in the home. We realize or recognize that at home, say, dad is a single parent and there's a much younger sibling in the home, and so dad can't work because there's no childcare for the little sibling. So this youth is staying at home and not going to school because he recognizes that dad needs to work, and this is one way that we can help. And so in recognizing that story and creating that, I suppose, different experience of that story, already you can see that instead of that being a youth problem, that behavior totally makes sense given what we now know. And so those are just some of the family dynamics that we're kind of sifting through as we go. The behavior change phase, our goals for that phase are, straight up to eliminate referral behaviors. So if the referral behavior is skipping school, not attending school, those are some of the behaviors that we're targeting. We want to improve family interactions with each other, and we want to build skills. And so even though we are a phase-based model with a lot of adherence and fidelity to the model, there's a lot of creativity in terms of what the therapist can bring, because how all families present is very different. And so there's a lot of creativity that I think comes into this phase as well. One thing that we are working on that is a little bit different as well is what we call a relationship assessment. So within each dyad in the family, we are assessing for hierarchy and connectedness. So hierarchy in a relationship would be who has the influence, and the connectedness would be how autonomous or connected is each person to each other within the family. And the reason that we do that is it directly informs some of the behavior change interventions that we develop with the family. So for example, if we have a youth who, which is very common, is more autonomous from his family, say he doesn't come home as often, checks in via text, likes to spend a lot of time in his room, we're not going to say that that's problematic, but what we're going to do is work on interventions that are a better fit for that assessment, that are a better fit for that dyad, because we know that a lot of conflict will come out when, for example, a parent is saying, come connect with me, I want to connect, and the youth is pushing away. So what's kind of different is that we don't necessarily try and change the those dynamics. What we do is just try and support them to happen more functionally. The caveat to that would be that when we are working with our little guys, so I would say kind of generally 11 and under, we would work to change that a little bit, just because there's obviously different safety parameters that come into play when you're working with little kids, where you for sure want the parent to be the one that has the influence in that relationship and have positive influence in that relationship. But this assessment kind of directly informs the interventions that the therapist will plan with the family. So some examples of behavior change interventions would be parenting and attachment, emotion regulation skills, coping skills, managing conflict, negotiating and problem solving, and communication. I would say those are our big umbrella categories that we target. And in Asterix, all the time with the whole family, all the time. So we are not divvying up a family to do different interventions. If we identify, for example, that mom, say, and youth are the ones who are kind of fighting all the time, we're still going to do that intervention with the entire family, because we've spent so much work in our motivation phase to help the family understand that everybody has a role in what's happening. And we recognize that everybody benefits from learning those skills, and we want the family, all of them, to be able to learn these and to be able to engage in practicing these skills. The other thing about behavior change and about kind of this model as well is that because we know we're working with sort of that moderate to high risk category for youth and families, we know we are not going to be targeting every single risk factor that is present for the family. We're still considered a short-term intensive service, but what we're looking for, what are the skills that are going to target most, and they're going to have the greatest impact on the family to move forward. That's part of what we're assessing when we move forward through the phases with families. I'm going to back up to our generalization phase, which is our final phase. And our goals for that phase are to generalize, maintain, and support change. In this phase, it sounds a little crazy, but we actually want the family to relapse or experience a relapse. And we want that because we want them to have the experience of going through that situation and then being able to navigate it differently with some help, but also we know that the family has had this chance to like learn the skills and go through it, and we want them to tell us, you know, this is how I see myself going through this situation, or this is what I'm going to do differently, or I'm kind of stuck here, I don't know what to do, I'm in crisis, you know, can you support? And so that's a little piece about the relapse. You know, the other thing is, say, for example, going back to, for example, youth who was referred, you know, for school issues, is a lot of times the skills that we do in the behavior change phase are focused in home and within the family context. And in this final phase, what we're doing is generalizing a lot of the skills to kind of some of those community settings. So, for example, this problem solving skill that we supported mom and youth to work on, how does that apply when mom then has to engage in a conversation with the school around what her child needs there? Because we know that often the same things apply. We just kind of have to think about and get creative about how to integrate those. At the end of treatment, so we kind of talk a lot about how at the beginning of treatment, we know that families are going through sort of peaks and valleys, so extreme highs and extreme lows, and that's often the cycle. And I'm sure you guys see this a lot. There's crisis, and then it calms down, and there's crisis again. And so our hope is that by the end of treatment, we're not making everything go away. It's not flat, because that's not real life, but they're less extreme of peaks. And that's kind of how we talk about success for families in this program. The goal isn't to make everything 100% better. Our goal is, again, adding more protective factors into that family system so that whatever challenges they encounter, they feel that they are equipped to reach out or manage differently themselves, either for themselves and for their kiddos. We do have some exclusion criteria. So if a youth is 18, over the age of 18, if the youth or child doesn't live home with no immediate plans to return, and that's simply because then we can't do the family work. That being said, we have done work with adoptive families or children and kids and youth who are transitioning to what will be their permanent home. We've done a lot. Or if a youth isn't living at home, but then the plan is for them to return home, we can definitely work in those contexts as well. Any destabilized or acute mental health, you know, when a person should be hospitalized, that's not appropriate for us. But that being said, we do a lot of discharge support from the hospital. So we receive a lot of referrals where we are part of a discharge plan or something, particularly for youth coming out of some of those mental health units. The other thing, which isn't an exclusion criteria, so it's not listed here, but it's just a consideration, is that if there's a family where there are kind of a lot of cognitive concerns or impairments, we don't find that that's often a good fit, simply because at the beginning, it's quite a narrative process. And so that just doesn't connect well. But, you know, I would say that's a point of assessment as opposed to an exclusion criteria. How to refer. So obviously through our Families Matter hub here, or YW Calgary, which we are also spoke to. We have our Carya intake line, which you can definitely call if you have any questions or to do an intake. There's our website. And we do a lot of self-referrals. I would say half of our referrals come through self-referrals. So that's it, I think. I'm going to stop share. Yeah, any questions? Was I timely? I don't know. I couldn't see a clock.
You are timely, very on
Okay.
schedule. I was trying to pay attention, and I'm not sure if I missed it or not, but can you tell me how long your involvement with families tends to be?
Yeah, usually works out to be about 6 months, which is usually on average about 12 sessions.
And is that flexible depending on the family situation?
Yeah, we would still consider ourselves a short-term service, so we're definitely not engaged with families in the long term, but you know, sometimes we have families open for 8 or 9 months, sometimes it's less. It kind of depends on sort of how quickly we get in the door and then go through. Somebody asked in the chat, what is the wait list? So right now, we don't have much of a wait list. We've kind of been cleaning that up quite a bit over the last couple of months. So there should be a pretty quick turnaround if you were to call it and refer. At this point, I think you could probably get picked up by one of our therapists within a week or so easily.
Can you tell me if there's more than one child in the family where there are issues and those issues are different? So maybe a younger child with truancy issues and an older child with substance abuse issues. Can you do that kind of combo approach for the family?
Yeah, absolutely. So usually we look at the family and kind of see who's presenting with sort of the most prevalent risk factors or kind of the most intense or the ones that seem the most high risk. And we definitely target those first. And then oftentimes, because some of the skills are quite broad and very specific to the family, that would be like in our generalization phase where we would say, okay, we talked about this emotion reg skill to apply to this situation. Let's talk about how this also applies with your little guy who's skipping school. Like so that's often what we're doing in families.
I see another question in the chat.
Where would you suggest someone go for support who has a child with a behavioral issue? Is that a question for me specifically, or are you referring to of all the spoke programs?
Nikki, do you want to elaborate on your question?
Oh, all the programs.
All the programs.
I mean, you're asking about, sorry.
Well, what's your response? And then we'll ask those who presented before you their response.
Yeah, all our referrals are behavioral referrals because all the referrals come through with sort of quote unquote the problem behavior. And so I think it kind of depends, and there's some assessment questions I think that would be followed up with around what is the behavior, the age, and that sort of thing. But I mean, absolutely, just sort of quick off the cuff answer would be yes, you could definitely refer them to our program for that.
I'm not sure if Virginia or I think Courtney's left. I don't see Virginia here right now, but I think resilient families would definitely be addressing behavior issues, a different approach from functional family therapy. But the functional family therapy program is operating with us in the Northeast and not the Southeast. I think rapid access counseling also would be able to address behavior.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in there. Certainly in those instances, we would definitely recommend parents booking a session and just kind of doing a parent coaching session around strategies of working with whatever behavioral challenge. We certainly could see the kiddo as well, but in a single session context, sometimes when there's complex behavioral stuff going on, it doesn't make as much sense. But we would definitely recommend in those instances to have parents book a session and give us some context, and we could support with some strategies.
So I guess the answer to that, it depends what kind of support you think is going to be a good fit. I don't think they're exclusive, but I think the Resilient Families program does work a lot more with dialectical behavior therapy and has the group component. You don't have a group component to the functional family therapy program, do you, Angela?
No, but I love hearing about a DBT community-based group, so that's great. The last thing I'll say about our program is that we are doing some face-to-face right now, dependent within certain kind of safety parameters that we have. So we're kind of doing a blend of Zoom and in-person, depending.
Yeah. And right now, I think Rapid Access is entirely Zoom, and Resilient Families is also a combo.
So this question is, what is the youngest child with behavior problems that you see? For FFT, we see 0 to 18.
Yeah, and with Rapid Access, we'd be happy to support caregivers of kiddos of any age. Typically, if kiddo is going to be part of a session, especially while we're doing virtual delivery, we say 6 and up, although we have seen younger kiddos, particularly when we move back to in-person sessions as well.
Mm-hmm. And we have not presented today, but of course there's home visitation offered through all of the hubs, and they are focused on the 0 to 6 age of children, and sort of longer term home-based work with the families. All right, I'm not seeing any more questions, so I want to say thank you to all of our presenters. It was very informative, and thank you for sharing your contact information. I would invite all of our participants to connect with the presenters for more information, to check out the agency websites. And of course, on Families Matter website, we will have the recorded sessions available. Give us a couple of days to get them in place, and then they'll be available to share. And our intake team through our hubs can also help to connect you with the programs, can help to give you more information, and also can do that directly with the families. So I invite you to get in touch if you want to know more, or if you have a family in mind, if you want to consult, if you want us to help facilitate the connection to the services and programs, or even sort out which might be the best connection, the best type of program.